This is East Idaho Newsmakers with Nate Eaton.
Welcome to East Idaho Newsmakers. Today we are talking with John Groberg. You have probably heard of him before. He wrote a book called The Other Side of Heaven, along with a movie that went along with that same title. Born and raised here in Idaho?
Right here in Idaho Falls.
Right here in Idaho Falls.
12th Street.
All right, and it went on to become the temple president of the Idaho Falls LDS Temple and some other prominent callings within the LDS Church. We're grateful that you're here with us today, John.
Glad to be here.
The big news is that The Other Side of Heaven was I guess, such a success that you're doing a follow-up movie.
Well, I'm not doing it, but
A follow-up movie's being done.
It's being done. Yes. The first one was based on the first book. It was originally called In the Eye of the Storm. And then when they decided to make a movie out of it, they changed it to The Other Side of Heaven. And when I say they, there were some people that had worked for Disney and were looking for material. And when they read the book, they just said, hey, we'd like to make a movie. They talked to me about it, and I said, well, you got to talk to the First Presidency of the church, because I wrote it for them, because they asked me to write it, because they said, you know, if you don't, that'll be a history or part of the history of the church. It'll be lost because we don't do things like that anymore. So I wrote it, and then when I wrote it, President Monson was the one that reviewed it, and he said, well, it's good, but you don't say anything about when you were mission president. And I said, well, you said about my mission. And he looked at me kind of sternly and said, so you don't consider being a mission president a mission? And I said, oh, okay, I see your point. He said, so you got to write another one. So I wrote a second one about when I was mission president. That was called The Fire of Faith, and that's the one that they're making this second movie on.
Wow, and is this also a Disney movie?
No, it's the same people making it, but they, for various reasons, they're not. They're just going independent.
Independent.
Yeah.
For those people not familiar with In the Eye of the Storm or The Other Side of Heaven, you were a young missionary called from Idaho Falls
Right.
to go to Tonga.
Right.
And tell us what happened. Tell us about that adventure.
Well, I left from the train depot right here in Idaho Falls.
Where was the depot at that time?
It was
Yellowstone?
Yeah,
Yellowstone?
it was on Yellowstone. It's
Okay.
been torn down now. It's not too far from where that round brick building is, where there's an underpass.
Okay, yeah.
Anyway, I left from there and was gone for 3 years. Had a wonderful time, a kind of an interesting time with various experiences. But that's what the book was about, and that's. I just wrote my experiences. That's all. I wasn't writing a book to sell or anything. I was just trying to fulfill an assignment given me by Elder Monson, and so.
So you kept journals as a missionary.
Right.
And when you came home, how did you get in touch with Thomas S. Monson?
Actually, the only way it came up after I came home from my mission, we moved back to Idaho Falls. I got married and finished school at BYU, and then we moved back to Idaho Falls, and I served as a bishop here in the 26th Ward for about 5 years. Then I was called as mission president to Tonga, and the supervisor of the Quorum of the 12 at the time was Thomas S. Monson. He was the youngest member of the Quorum of the 12.
Okay.
He was the supervisor, and he came very often to visit with us and see how things were going. When I say very often, a couple times a year maybe. And he'd heard all these stories about when I was a young missionary, and so he started talking to people, and he says, and then a few years later, I was called as a general authority in the church. And President Monson, he was elder. Well, I think he might have been in the First Presidency by then. He said, you got to write a book. That's what I mentioned before, and then the second one. So
okay.
That's my association with him.
There are some incredible stories that you tell in the book and in the movie. I seem to remember, this might be morbid, the one with the rats eating your foot. Was that right?
Yeah. Well, people say, did that really happen? And I said, I I don't know, I didn't have a video camera. I just went on what the people told me. They said that's what happened.
Yeah.
And people are kind of grossed out a little bit by it, but the facts are that I lost my shoe. I didn't lose my shoes. It was so humid and so hot and muddy, and that my shoes wore out very quickly. And the island I was on first, I was there. There were no other white people there. I had a native companion, a wonderful fellow by the name of Feki Bo'uha. He took care of me. But when my shoes wore out, there were no stores. There was nothing on the island. You couldn't buy anything. No electricity, no cars, nothing. You just no food unless you grew it yourself or caught it out of the ocean. So when my shoes were gone, then you go barefoot. That's just what you do. And I developed very thick calluses, as everyone does that goes barefoot for a long time. And apparently what happened is, and they warned me, they told me, don't sleep with your feet uncovered. And one night, it's just so hot and muggy. I guess I was not aware of it, but I must have pulled the sheet off or something. And when I woke up in the morning, I felt all right. I didn't feel anything during the night. And so when I stood up, my feet just split apart. And it's hard for me to explain what happened, but years later, the local people knew, well, I was in real trouble, so they immediately put me out in the sun, and they literally sunburned the bottom of my feet black, absolutely black. And I had trouble with my feet for many years. About 25 years later, it just got so bad I finally went to a doctor to see, and he says, no wonder you're hurt. You've got cancer on the bottom of your feet. And he says, I've been removing skin cancer for years, and I've never seen it on the bottom of someone's foot. How could that happen? And so I told him about this sunburn, and he did some research. He removed the cancer. I go every year and have it checked. It's never come back. They removed it. Good. And he said, well, here's what happened, I think. He said, rats, their cycle in life is to eat dead things. And if they sense a blood vessel or a nerve, they back away because that indicates life, and they don't like live things, they like dead things. And so, but calluses, any of you that have had calluses know you can stick a pin in it, you can't feel it, it doesn't bleed, it's dead, but it's there. So apparently what happened is the rats gnawed away at the calluses, and if they ever sensed a nerve or a blood vessel, they would back away. And so I didn't feel anything. So that's what happened. And he said, well, you can really thank the people, because had they not done that, because once your feet split apart, then the infection from the rats would go through. They said, you would have been dead by sundown. But by putting you in the ultraviolet rays, something about the ultraviolet rays pulls infection out. And that saved your life.
Holy smokes.
Gives you cancer, but we can take care of that.
We can take care of that. And are your feet okay today?
They're okay now.
I believe that you also had a near-death experience on your mission, didn't you? Weren't you stranded at sea?
Yes, there were actually 2 or 3 times when I was pretty close. Once we had a hurricane that we went 9 weeks. We had food for about the first 4, maybe 5 weeks, and then the last 4 or 5 weeks I could see every bone in my body, the ribs, and I couldn't do anything. We had water because it rained, but the hurricane wiped out all of the crops, and a rescue boat didn't come for 9 weeks, and they didn't know about it because there was no communication. They did have a telegraph, but it was ruined during the hurricane.
So no way to transmit a message off the island.
But I got to a point where I talk about these things in the book. That's why the book's better than the movie, because you can go into more detail.
Yeah.
In the movie, it's hard to depict things that are slow evolving.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, and then I was also...
Wasn't it an image of your wife, or was that Hollywoodized in the movie? Because
No,
you had your girlfriend back here.
Right, yeah. I had met her at BYU before I left, and we weren't engaged. It was just the agreement we had is we would write and see how things happened when I got home. And once I was shipwrecked with in another storm. The first storm was on land. The second storm was at sea, and it came really close. I mean, it's hard to say whether you would have drowned or not, but I was losing energy, because when you're in a heavy waves and so forth, it takes a lot of effort to stay above water. And I finally got to a point where you don't give up, but you just can't put one hand in front of the other. And as I was sinking for what could well have been the last time, and just didn't feel like I had any energy left, that's kind of the vision that came to my mind, was the vision of Jean. And I just kind of heard her saying, "Oh, come on, you can do it." And the thought that came to me, well, if I drown here, I won't see Jean again. So I don't know, the energy came from someplace, and I made it to shore.
Wow. It's an inspirational book and movie as well. Like you said, the book's better. So you come back from your mission, and did you start working?
I finished school. I had another couple of years of school. Then we went back to Indiana to get an MBA, and then started working here in Idaho Falls.
And what did you do here in Idaho Falls?
I was in real estate development with the D.V. Groberg company at that time, and still exists today. My two brothers, Dick and Joe, are running it, and some of their children, and one of my sons and two of Dick's sons are kind of running it now.
And you, at what age were you called to go back to be the mission president?
Well, let's see. I was called as bishop when I was 27, and I was 5 years, so I was 31 or 32.
Wow.
Yeah, I was 31 when I got my call, and 32 when we arrived in Tonga.
And for those unfamiliar with the LDS system, mission presidents, you go over there and you're in charge of the mission, not just the missionaries, but even the members who aren't in. Were there any stakes?
There weren't any stakes.
So you were in charge of all the members as well.
Right.
And how many members of the church at that time?
We had about 10,000.
Wow. And was the mission spread over several islands?
Yeah, there's, let's see, in Tonga, there's hundreds of islands, but there's only about 30 that are inhabited. And then we also had Niue, and we also had Fiji, and Fiji has hundreds of islands too, but probably about 20 or 30 that were inhabited.
And you had a young family, I would imagine.
Our oldest daughter when we left was 7, and our youngest daughter was 6 weeks.
Whoa. And what did your wife think about that?
Well, she'd heard me tell stories about how wonderful the Tongan people were.
Yeah.
And so she was excited, but I think a little, women are rightfully want the best for their children, and so there were a few questions of just what would happen there, but they were so loving and kind and helpful that it was fine.
And you were there 3 years as president?
I was there 3 years as a missionary, then another 3 years as president. All 5 of our daughters were girls. They were all born here in Idaho Falls. In fact, we ended up with 11 children. 9 of them were born right here in Idaho Falls, in the same room at the hospital, delivered by the same doctor, Dr. Levitt, right here in Idaho Falls.
Wow. What would you say that you learned going back as mission president, older, now in charge? What's 1 or 2 of the lessons you learned?
Well, one of the great lessons I relearned, I suppose, is how wonderful and loving and kind and faithful the Tongan people were to us and are. Tonga as a country still observes the Sabbath day, for instance. It's just part of their tradition, and culture. No planes come in or out on Sunday, no buses drive, no, stores are not open. But I think I learned that their prayers and their faithfulness and their wanting to help and their strong families, and they just sort of adopted us as part of their family. Our first son was actually born there when and he had some real health challenges. Some of that comes out in the movie. But the Queen of Tonga was a good friend of ours, and she told Jane when she found she was expected, she says, "You're going to have a boy. You've come to Tonga to have a boy, because you've got enough girls now, you need a boy." And
sure enough.
And sure enough, it was a boy. But he was born with some very serious congenital health challenges and came very close to passing away there. But through their faith and the miracle of prayers and blessings and so forth, of not just members of the church, people that were of other religions, fasted and prayed for him, and anyway, he made it.
We are talking with John Groberg, the author of In the Eye of the Storm, The Other Side of Heaven, along with the second book,
The Fire of Faith.
The Fire of Faith. Is that what the movie will be called?
It's going to be called The Other Side of Heaven 2, The Fire of Faith, yeah.
And when is that expected to be out?
Well, they're shooting it right now, filming it right now, and they think it'll take about a year, so probably April of 2019.
And they're shooting it in Tonga?
In Fiji and Tonga.
Okay, and have you gone over? Are you consulting at all, or are
No.
you just kind of staying back?
You don't get involved when they get the script. They had to get permission, of course, from the First Presidency to do it, because the second book was written at their request too. They just gave a letter and said, as long as you stick close to the book, it's all right with us, or we won't raise an objection, is the way they put it. And so, no, you don't really get an opportunity, because I would stick to the details, and they have to tell a story that is, so they combine events and combine, like, there's several things that happen. I said, well, it wasn't quite this way. Well, this happened and this happened. Yeah, but this happened here and this happened here and this happened then and this happened. They said, well, we've got to put them all together.
Got to get it in 90 minutes.
Yeah, and so I don't have very much input that way, but they have requested that we go down and do what they call a cameo, where we'll kind of be disguised. I'm taking my two sons. We just have the 2 boys and the 9 daughters. The daughters aren't going, but the boys are all going.
11 kids?
Uh-huh.
Wow.
And the 2 sons are going, and we're going to be, I don't know exactly where. They've got something. I said, just make sure people don't recognize me.
Okay, spot him in the movie. Where's Waldo?
It's like the first movie, President Monson used to always say, my favorite part of the movie is seeing you and Sheen wave goodbye to yourself when you get married. Because we were doing a cameo there. I'm hiding behind the camera, and she's got a big floppy hat on.
As the parents of the...
Yeah, right.
Yeah, wow. So it sounds like you and President Monson were pretty good friends.
We were very good friends. He was a wonderful friend.
What was that friendship like? I mean, what did you learn from him? We know him publicly, but you know him personally.
I just think that the more you knew him, the more genuine you recognized his sincere love and desire to help people was. I mean, his public persona was that, but it was even deeper than that the closer you got to know him. For instance, not many years ago, we had one of our daughters that lived in Arizona developed a brain tumor, and it had to be operated on. And President Monson heard about it, and he was going down to dedicate the Gilbert Temple. And he called her and said, Jenny, I'd like you to come over and visit for her. So she brought her family, husband, and they had 3 children, and visited with him, and he gave her a blessing. And he didn't need to do that, and that's when he was the prophet, and he was busy. But that's just symptomatic. Once a friend, always a friend. He was he was just wonderful. That's all I'm
And
gonna say.
the neat thing is you knew him from when he was a young man,
right.
and you could see him grow and eventually take that role.
And they have a couple of scenes in the movie about him when he was younger. And
Oh, wow.
they found an actor from New Zealand that is almost the spitting image
Of him?
of him.
Oh, that should be fun to see. Do you have any relationship with President Nelson?
Oh, yes. Very good friends. We've been with him on many assignments. Both when he was general Sunday school superintendent and after he was made a member of the 12. Yeah, in fact, I've been to Tonga with him a couple of times and been on many other assignments. We've been to his house when his first wife was alive a couple of times. He's a little different type of person, but again, just that absolute, the closer you know him, the more sincere you realize he is. I mean, this is not a fake, this is not a performance. This is who they are.
Yeah. He's 93.
Right.
And you look at him and you think he looks like he's 55. And of course, with conference, all of those changes, he doesn't slow down.
I went to a state conference in Vernal, Utah with him quite a few years ago. And we had some meetings in the Vernal Temple, and they have quite a few stairs. And I was going up the stairs. I mean, this is quite a few, maybe 20 years ago or so. But still, he was, 73 or something. I was probably 43 or, I don't know exactly. And I was going up the stairs, and all of a sudden, boom, here it goes right
Passes you up the stairs. So you come back from your mission. Is that when they ask you to be a general authority?
I served for 7 years as what they now call an area authority, 70. And my assignment was the South Pacific. So I commuted from Idaho Falls 4, 5, 6, 1 year, 7 times, but normally 4 or 5 times a year for holding state conferences in Hawaii, Samoa, Tonga, Fiji, Tahiti.
That's a lot of miles.
Guam,
Wow.
Yeah, I commuted from Idaho Falls. It was about 25,000 miles round trip. It was usually 2 or 3 weeks at a time.
Would you say, you're probably humble in 1 minute, but you probably have had a bigger role in Tonga with the LDS Church growth than maybe anybody.
Well, I think the growth is due to everyone. There's a lot of great mission presidents, a lot of great missionaries, a lot of wonderful school teachers. Probably as far as continuous, I've probably had as much as anyone, but I wouldn't say I'm responsible any more than anyone else.
But if you were to go back today, they all know you.
Oh, yeah.
That everyone knows John Groberg.
Well, they don't know John Groberg, they know Kolipoki.
Kolipoki, that's
Yeah.
okay. And that means?
Well, that's kind of their attempt to pronounce Groberg. In Tongan, they don't have a G, they don't have an R, and they don't have a B. So how do you pronounce Groberg without a G and an R and a B?
Kolipoki. Oh, yeah, there you go.
And it probably means a few other things locally, but it's actually a term of endearment and familiarity.
What does a general? So you're called to supervise the South Pacific, and then you're actually called to be a general authority.
Right.
What does that mean for those people that aren't familiar?
As an Area 70, I had a specific area. As a general authority, I went wherever the First Presidency, who are in charge, wherever they asked me to go. We lived with our family. We lived in Hawaii for a few years. We lived in South America, in Buenos Aires, Argentina, where all of the children that were with us, we just had 5 at that time, where they all just learned Spanish and all very, very fluent in Spanish. And then we moved to Hong Kong, where our youngest daughter graduated from high school. She did very well in Mandarin Chinese, and we've lived a few other places that they've sent us.
Wow, you really have been all over the world. And as a general authority, you supervise the work of the church in that area.
Right, like in South America, we had Argentina, Uruguay, Paraguay, Chile. And then in Hong Kong, we had all 23 nations of Asia, except for Japan and Korea. And in Hawaii, we had all of the Pacific. So it depends on where you are. You do what they ask you to do.
And you do that until you're 70.
Right.
And then you were asked to be the temple president in Idaho Falls.
Idaho Falls, yes.
So what are you doing now?
We're visiting family. We have 45 grandchildren, and they're graduating from high school and going on missions. In fact, we were just in Arizona last week. Our oldest son's second boy got back from his mission to Ecuador, and we went down to hear him. And so we have 4 out on missions, 4 grandchildren on missions now, and then several graduating from high school and getting Eagle Scouts and being in plays, and so we do that a lot. And then we have quite a lot of association with not just the Tongans, but the Polynesian community, and we do a lot of firesides, and just, I don't know, it seems like we keep busy.
I bet you do.
It's mostly family.
As a general authority, is there 1 or 2 special experiences that you can recall over that touched you personally, dealing with people, maybe here in America or elsewhere?
Well, there's several. I think one of the greatest blessings of being a general authority is associating with the members of the First Presidency and the 12. They're all busy men, but they're all good men. And there's something, of course, I was in business, and here in Idaho Falls, the business was wonderful. But when you're in business, you're dealing with people that are looking they're looking to make something too. And there's nothing wrong with that. And there were good people, but there are also some that you have to kind of say, no, I don't really want to deal with them. Working with those in those positions, the general authorities, there's not one of them that I didn't feel I could trust them with anything. I mean, it just makes you realize what it's like to be able to be with people who are totally honest and totally forthright and totally wanting to help. It's not just something they do so they can get a job here or something there. I think that's probably the main thing of being a general authority, is how wonderful the people are that you deal with. And I would say the second thing is, by being all over the world, sure, I love the people of Tonga because I've spent a lot of time there, but I love the people of South America, and I love the people in Asia. There are good people all over the world, and they're not all members of our church. There's good people in all churches, and we would work with them on humanitarian projects, particularly in Asia, in Mongolia, in Cambodia, in Myanmar, and India, and I'm just impressed with how many good people there are all over the world.
Looking back to that 10th grader here in Idaho Falls decades ago, is it bizarre to see where your life has gone?
Well, I never would have guessed it, that's for sure. In fact, when I got the call to go to Tonga, my first question is, where on earth is Tonga? I had no idea where it was. And of course, growing up in Idaho Falls, see, I was born here in 1934, so we went through the Depression and the Second World War, and Idaho Falls wasn't that big at that time, and it just seemed like I knew everyone. I didn't, of course, but it seemed like it. But when I went to Tonga with a different language, different color of skin, different culture, different climate, everything was different. And to begin with, I just kind of, what's a white kid from Idaho Falls doing here? Yeah. But after a little while, I realized people are the same. It doesn't make any difference, the color of their skin or what they eat or what their culture things are. They're good people. I mean, I'm not saying all of them. There are crooks everywhere, I guess you might say. But there are also good people, and I just I became totally colorblind, totally language blind. I mean, I speak 3 or 4 languages fairly well, and I understand just good people. That's all I can say.
And what do you think when you come back to Idaho Falls and
There's
see the
good
growth?
people here too.
Yeah, good. There are.
Wonderful people there. In fact, I in my mind, I've thought of that. Some people say, well, what was it like growing up in Idaho Falls? And I said, it was wonderful. I can't think of any place I would rather grow up than right here. And nor can I think of a time I'd rather grow up, because, you know, sure it was the Depression, sure it was the World War, but we were safe. And my folks, you know, we worry about our children or grandchildren going out. I don't think my folks ever gave a second thought. Well, even when we raised our family over on Homer Avenue, the east side of town, or it's not too far east anymore, there's so much further. But in our little area there were 4 or 5 families that had 4 or 5 children like we did. It was just an idealistic thing. You'd never worry about them. They'd be out playing. I remember sometimes when we were getting ready for supper, my wife would get a call from, say, Margaret Wood or someone, and say, oh, we've got a couple of your kids over here for supper. Is it all right if they eat here? Do you have any of ours there? That was just
That's how it was.
That's how it was.
Yeah.
It's kind of unfortunate that we have all the security problems that we have today, but still, you know, you adjust.
Yeah. Well, we appreciate you coming in to talk with us. We're looking forward to the new movie about a year from now, The Other Side of Heaven 2, but you can pick up the book. The book's out.
The book's out, yeah. Just get it at Desert Book or Amazon. Yeah,
Amazon.
It's called The Fire of Faith.
The Fire of Faith. You think they'll do a premiere here in Idaho Falls?
Oh, I'm sure they'll do something. I'm not sure.
All right. Oh, will you come back
that's
for
again
it?
not my part. That's someone else is doing all that.
If you come back for it and they do one, we want to interview you again.
I'll do it. I'll do it.
John Groberg, you've impacted a lot of lives, thousands of lives here in eastern Idaho and in Tonga and around the world, and we appreciate all you've done. Thank you for watching East Idaho Newsmakers. Have a good week.